The morning sun filtered through the large windows of Rosie's Corner Cafe as Maya wiped down the last table from the breakfast rush. Her feet already ached in her worn sneakers, and she glanced at the clock hanging above the espresso machine. Only 2:30 in the afternoon, and she still had 4 more hours to go before her shift ended. Maya had been pulling double shifts at the cafe for almost a month now. Every morning at 6, she would unlock the front door and start brewing the first batch of coffee. Every evening at 9, she would flip the open sign to closed and count the day's tips with tired fingers. The extra money wasn't for anything fancy. Her mom needed surgery, and the insurance company kept finding new reasons to delay their approval. So Maya worked and worked and worked some more. At 22, Maya should have been worried about college finals and weekend plans with friends. Instead, she found herself memorizing which regular customers liked their coffee extra hot, and which ones preferred their sandwiches cut diagonally. She had become an expert at reading people's moods before they even reached the counter. Mrs. Chen always ordered a decaf latte when she was stressed about her grandchildren. Young Tom from the bookstore next door would ask for extra shots of espresso during exam week. The businessman in the gray suit always wanted his coffee black and his change counted twice. Working at Rosie's had taught Maya more about human nature than any psychology class ever could. She watched people hurry in with phone calls glued to their ears, their faces tight with worry about meetings and deadlines. She saw tired parents trying to juggle crying babies while ordering their desperately needed caffeine fix. She witnessed first dates where nervous couples spilled sugar packets and laughed too loudly at each other's jokes. Maya took pride in her work, even when her paycheck barely covered her textbooks and bus fare. She remembered every customer's usual order and always had a warm smile ready, even on days when her own world felt like it was falling apart. Her manager, an older woman named Rose who had owned the cafe for 15 years, often said that Maya had a gift for making people feel welcome. This particular Tuesday started like any other. The morning crowd had been the usual mix of commuters grabbing coffee to go and local workers settling in with laptops and newspapers. Maya had served probably 50 customers before lunch, each interaction blending into the next like a familiar dance. Pour the coffee, take the money, wish them a good day, repeat. But as the afternoon settled in, Maya noticed the crowd was different today. More restless, more impatient. The summer heat was making everyone cranky, and the air conditioning in the cafe wasn't quite keeping up. People were checking their phones constantly, tapping their feet while waiting in line, and generally acting like they had somewhere very important to be. Maya was refilling the sugar dispensers when she first spotted him. A man in an expensive-looking navy suit sat alone at table 7, the small round table by the window that usually stayed empty during busy periods. He wasn't reading a newspaper or scrolling through his phone like most solo customers. Instead, he was staring out the window with the kind of intense focus that made Maya wonder what he was seeing out there that the rest of them were missing. She noticed his hands first. They were clenched into tight fists on the table, and she could see him opening and closing them repeatedly, like he was trying to work out some kind of nervous tension. His hair was perfectly styled, and his suit looked like it cost more than Maya made in 2 months. But there was something off about him. Something that made her server instincts kick in. Maya had learned to read the warning signs. Some customers came in angry at the world and looking for someone to blame. Others arrived sad and just needed someone to be kind to them. A few showed up confused and overwhelmed, like they had wandered into the wrong place at the wrong time. This man seemed to fit into all 3 categories at once. His phone buzzed on the table and Maya watched him grab it with shaking hands. Whatever he read on the screen made his whole body tense up even more. He set the phone down carefully, like he was afraid he might throw it across the room if he wasn't careful. Then he picked it up again and stared at the same message for what felt like several minutes. Maya finished with the sugar dispensers and moved on to wiping down the counter, but she kept glancing over at table 7. The man's leg was bouncing under the table now, and she could see him checking his watch every few seconds. He looked like someone waiting for news that he really didn't want to receive. The cafe was getting busier as the afternoon crowd rolled in. Office workers on late lunch breaks mixed with college students settling in for study sessions. The noise level rose as conversations overlapped and the espresso machine hissed and gurgled through order after order. Maya moved through it all with practiced efficiency, taking orders, making drinks, and clearing tables while keeping one eye on the man at table 7. She had been working in customer service long enough to know that some people brought their bad days into the cafe with them. Usually a friendly smile and quick service was enough to improve someone's mood, or at least prevent it from getting worse. But this man seemed to be fighting some kind of internal battle that had nothing to do with coffee or pastries. Maya decided it was time to approach him. She grabbed her order pad and pen, straightened her apron, and walked over to table 7 with her best professional smile in place. As she got closer, she could see that his expensive shirt was wrinkled, like he had been wearing it for too long or had been running his hands through his hair all day. When she reached his table, Maya took a breath and prepared to deliver her usual friendly greeting. She had no idea that in the next few minutes this ordinary Tuesday afternoon would turn into something that would change both of their lives forever. She had no way of knowing that her decision to approach this particular customer at this particular moment would set off a chain of events that would leave everyone in the cafe talking about what happened for weeks to come. All Maya knew was that someone looked like they needed help, and helping people was what she did best. She raised her pen to her order pad and opened her mouth to speak, completely unaware that she was about to become part of a story that none of them would ever forget. Maya approached table 7 with careful steps, her server instincts telling her this customer needed extra attention. As she got closer, she could see the stress lines around his eyes and the way his jaw was clenched tight. His expensive watch caught the afternoon light as he drummed his fingers against the table in an anxious rhythm. "Good afternoon, sir. Welcome to Rosie's Corner Cafe," Maya said with her warmest smile. "Can I get you something to drink today?" The man looked up at her with eyes that seemed to be seeing right through her. For a moment, Maya wondered if he had even heard her question. Then he blinked and focused on her face like he was remembering where he was. "I need tea," he said, his voice tight and controlled. "But not just any tea." "Do you have chamomile blend with honey and lemon?" Maya nodded. "We do have chamomile, and I can definitely add honey and lemon for you. Would you like that served hot?" "It has to be perfect," the man said, his voice getting more intense. "I'm having the worst day of my life, and I just need one thing to go right." "Just one thing? Can you understand that?" Maya felt her heart go out to him. She had served hundreds of customers who were having bad days, and she knew that sometimes the smallest gesture could make a difference. "Absolutely, sir. I'll make sure it's exactly what you need. How would you like the temperature?" Some people prefer it very hot, others like it just warm enough to drink right away. Hot, but not so hot that it burns. And the honey needs to be mixed in completely, not just sitting at the bottom. And fresh lemon, not the bottled stuff. His hands were shaking slightly as he spoke. "My daughter always makes it perfectly. She knows exactly how I like it." Maya noticed the way his voice softened when he mentioned his daughter, and she made a mental note to pay extra attention to every detail of his order. "I'll take care of everything. Fresh lemon juice, honey stirred in completely, and the perfect temperature. Give me just a few minutes." As Maya walked back to the counter, she could feel the man's eyes following her. The cafe was getting busier, and there was a line of customers waiting to order. But something told her this tea was more important than the usual rush. She asked her coworker Jake to handle the other customers. While she focused on making the perfect cup, Maya selected the best chamomile tea bags from their premium collection and heated the water to exactly the right temperature, not boiling, which would make the tea bitter, but hot enough to properly steep the delicate flowers. She cut a fresh lemon and squeezed the juice carefully, making sure no seeds fell into the cup. The honey went in next, and she stirred it slowly until it dissolved completely, just like the man had requested. While the tea steeped, Maya glanced back at table 7. The man was on his phone again, and even from across the room, she could see that his hands were trembling. Whatever conversation he was having was making him more agitated by the minute. His free hand was gripping the edge of the table so hard that his knuckles had turned white. After exactly 4 minutes, Maya removed the tea bag and gave the cup one final gentle stir. She placed it on a small tray with a spoon and a napkin, then carefully carried it back to table 7. The man had just ended his phone call, and his face looked even more strained than before. "Here you go, sir," Maya said, setting the cup down gently in front of him. "Chamomile tea with honey and fresh lemon, prepared exactly as you requested." The man picked up the cup immediately and took a small sip. Maya watched his face, hoping to see some sign of satisfaction or relief. Instead, his expression darkened. "This is too hot," he said, setting the cup down with a sharp clink. "I can't drink this. It's going to burn my tongue." Maya kept her smile in place. I'm so sorry about that. Would you like me to add a little cool water to bring the temperature down? Or I could make you a fresh cup. No, that will make it too weak, the man said, his voice rising slightly. Several customers at nearby tables were starting to look over. Just leave it for a minute to cool down. Maya nodded and stepped back, giving him space while staying nearby in case he needed anything else. The cafe noise seemed to fade into the background as she watched him stare at the cup like it had personally offended him. His phone buzzed again, and when he read the message, his whole body tensed up like a coiled spring. 2 minutes later, he picked up the cup again and took another sip. This time he immediately set it down with more force than necessary. Now it's too cool and it tastes weak, he said, his voice carrying across the cafe. This isn't right at all. I specifically said I needed this to be perfect. Maya approached the table again, her customer service training kicking in. I'm so sorry you're not happy with it, sir. Let me make you a completely fresh cup. I'll adjust the steeping time and make sure the temperature is just right. You don't understand, the man said, standing up abruptly. His chair scraped loudly against the floor, and the conversation around them began to die down as more people turned to watch. I asked for one simple thing. One perfect cup of tea. That's all I wanted. Maya could see that other customers were starting to feel uncomfortable. A young mother with a baby moved her stroller slightly away from table 7. The college students at the corner table had stopped studying and were watching the scene unfold. Even Jake behind the counter had paused in making drinks to see what was happening. Sir, I completely understand your frustration, Maya said, keeping her voice calm and steady. Sometimes the first cup isn't quite right, and that's okay. Let me start over and make you something that will be exactly what you need. But the man wasn't listening anymore. His face had turned red, and Maya could see the anger building in his eyes like storm clouds gathering before a thunderstorm. His hands were shaking more noticeably now, and she realized that whatever was really bothering him had very little to do with the tea. Perfect, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. I just wanted something perfect on the worst day of my life. Is that too much to ask? Before Maya could respond, before she could offer to help or try to calm him down, the man grabbed the cup with both hands and looked directly at her. For just a second, time seemed to stop. Maya saw the pain and desperation in his eyes, saw the moment when his control finally snapped. Then, without warning, he hurled the entire cup of tea directly at her. The hot liquid hit Maya square in the chest, soaking through her uniform and splashing onto her arms and face. The ceramic cup shattered on the floor behind her with a loud crash that seemed to echo through the suddenly silent cafe. Tea dripped from her hair and ran down her shirt as she stood there, too shocked to move. Every single person in Rosie's Corner Cafe stopped what they were doing. Conversations died mid-sentence. Coffee cups froze halfway to lips. Even the espresso machine seemed to quiet down, as if it too was stunned by what had just happened. Maya felt the warm tea seeping through her clothes and onto her skin. She could taste the chamomile and honey that had splashed onto her lips. Her uniform, which she had put on clean and pressed that morning, was now stained and dripping. But more than the physical discomfort, she felt the weight of everyone's eyes on her, waiting to see what she would do next. The man stood frozen, his empty hands still extended toward her, as if he couldn't quite believe what he had just done. The anger was already draining from his face, replaced by something that looked like horror at his own actions. Maya wiped the tea from her eyes and looked around the cafe. Every face was turned toward her, waiting for her reaction. Some looked shocked, others angry on her behalf. A few customers had their phones out, ready to call security or the police. The entire room held its breath, waiting to see how this young server would respond to being humiliated in front of a room full of strangers. What happened next would surprise everyone in that cafe, including Maya herself. Maya stood there for what felt like hours, though it was probably only a few seconds. Tea dripped steadily from her uniform onto the cafe floor, creating small puddles around her feet. The chamomile and honey mixture that had been meant to comfort this troubled man was now soaking through her shirt and leaving sticky patches on her arms. The silence in the cafe was so complete that Maya could hear the wall clock ticking above the counter. She could hear someone's phone buzzing on a table across the room. She could even hear the soft hum of the refrigerator behind the counter. But no one spoke. No one moved. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Maya's first instinct was exactly what everyone expected. her face flushed hot with embarrassment and anger. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. A voice in her head screamed at her to shout back, to demand that this man leave immediately, to call the police and have him arrested for assault. She had every right to be furious. She had done nothing wrong except try to help someone who seemed to be struggling. But as Maya stood there, dripping and humiliated, something else caught her attention. The man who had just thrown tea at her wasn't celebrating his outburst or storming out of the cafe like she might have expected. Instead, he was staring at his own hands like he couldn't believe what they had just done. His face had gone completely pale, and Maya could see his chest rising and falling rapidly, like he was having trouble breathing. In that moment, Maya remembered something her grandmother used to tell her when she was little. "Mija," her grandmother would say in her gentle voice, hurt people. When someone is cruel to you, it's usually because they're carrying pain that has nothing to do with you." Maya had always thought that was just something adults said to make kids feel better about bullies at school. But looking at this man now, seeing the way his whole body was shaking, seeing the genuine horror in his eyes as he stared at what he had done, Maya realized her grandmother might have been onto something. Instead of yelling or demanding an apology, Maya did something that surprised even herself. She reached behind the counter and grabbed a clean dish towel. Slowly and deliberately, she began wiping the tea from her face and arms. The entire cafe watched in stunned silence as she cleaned herself off without saying a word. "Oh my God," whispered the young mother at the nearby table. "Is she okay? Should we call someone?" Maya heard the whispers starting around the room, but she kept her focus on the man at table 7. Now that she was really looking at him, she could see things she had missed before. His expensive suit was wrinkled not just from sitting, but like he had been wearing it for days. His hair, which had looked perfectly styled from a distance, was actually messy and unkempt up close. His eyes were red-rimmed, like he had been crying or hadn't slept in a very long time. "Sir," Maya said quietly, her voice cutting through the whispers around them. "Are you okay?" The question seemed to hit the man like a physical blow. He stumbled backward and collapsed into his chair, staring up at Maya with complete bewilderment. "Am I okay?" he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're asking if I'm okay? I just threw hot tea at you. I humiliated you in front of all these people. You should be calling the police. You should be screaming at me. Why are you asking if I'm okay?" Maya finished cleaning her face and arms, then set the towel down on the table. She could feel everyone in the cafe watching this strange interaction unfold. But somehow their attention didn't bother her anymore. Something about this man's reaction told her that there was much more to this story than a bad day and a cup of imperfect tea. "Because," Maya said, pulling out the empty chair across from him, "people don't usually throw tea at servers unless something really terrible is happening in their life. And you look like someone who's carrying something really heavy right now." The man's eyes filled with tears, and Maya saw him try desperately to blink them away. His hands were trembling so badly now that he had to clasp them together in his lap to keep them still. "You don't understand," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm not a bad person. I don't do things like this. I've never in my life thrown anything at another human being. I tip generously at restaurants. I say please and thank you. I hold doors open for strangers. I'm not this person." Maya sat down in the chair across from him, ignoring the wet patches on her uniform and the curious stares from the other customers. Up close, she could see that this man was probably around her father's age, maybe in his late 40s or early 50s. He had the kind of hands that suggested he worked in an office, soft and well manicured. There was a wedding ring on his left hand, and Maya noticed a small photo sticking out of his wallet on the table. "I believe you," Maya said simply. "Good people sometimes do bad things when they're in pain. It doesn't make the bad thing okay, but it also doesn't make you a bad person." The man looked at her like she was speaking a foreign language. Around them, Maya could hear customers beginning to whisper more loudly. Some were pulling out their phones, probably to record what was happening or to call for help. But Maya kept her attention focused on the man across from her. "What's your name?" she asked gently. "David," he said automatically, then seemed surprised that he had answered. "My name is David. I'm Maya," she said, extending her hand across the table. "It's nice to meet you, David, even under these circumstances." David stared at her outstretched hand for a long moment before tentatively reaching out to shake it. His palm was sweaty and cold, and Maya could feel how badly he was shaking. "Maya," David said, testing her name like he was trying to make sure it was real. I owe you an apology. I owe you more than an apology. I should pay for your uniform to be cleaned. I don't know what I should do. I've never done anything like this before. Maya could see Jake behind the counter making worried gestures at her, probably wondering if he should call the police or at least ask David to leave. Some of the other customers were getting restless, clearly uncomfortable with the situation, but Maya had a feeling that if she could just keep David talking, she might be able to understand what had driven him to this point. David, she said, keeping her voice gentle and steady. When you ordered the tea earlier, you mentioned your daughter. You said she always makes it perfectly. At the mention of his daughter, David's face crumpled completely. The tears he had been fighting finally spilled over, running down his cheeks as his whole body began to shake with silent sobs. She does, he whispered. Every Sunday morning she makes me chamomile tea with honey and lemon. We sit on the porch and talk about everything and nothing. She's 17 and she still wants to spend time with her old dad. Can you believe that? Most teenagers think their parents are embarrassing, but my daughter, she's special. Maya felt her heart clench as she watched this broken man talk about his child. The love in his voice was unmistakable, but there was also something else. Something that sounded like fear or maybe grief. She sounds wonderful, Maya said softly. You're lucky to have that kind of relationship with her. I was lucky, David said, his voice so quiet that Maya had to lean forward to hear him. I was so incredibly lucky and I didn't even realize it until... His voice trailed off and Maya could see him struggling with something too difficult to put into words. Around them, the cafe had grown quiet again as people realized they were witnessing something deeply personal and painful. Until what, David? Maya asked gently. David looked up at her with eyes full of such raw pain that Maya felt tears prick at her own eyes. Whatever he was about to tell her, she knew it was going to change everything. She knew it was going to explain why a seemingly normal man had just thrown tea at a stranger, and why her decision to respond with compassion instead of anger was about to reveal a story that would break everyone's heart. Until this morning, David whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the cafe's air conditioning, until I got the phone call that changed everything. David's words hung in the air like a weight that everyone in the cafe could feel. Maya watched as he struggled to find the strength to continue, his hands shaking so badly that he had to grip the edge of the table to steady himself. The tears that had started as a few drops were now flowing freely down his cheeks, and he made no effort to wipe them away. This morning, David said again, his voice cracking with each word. I was in my office, going through emails and thinking about a presentation I had to give next week. It was just a normal Tuesday morning. I was drinking coffee from my favorite mug, the one my daughter gave me for Father's Day 3 years ago. It has a terrible drawing of the two of us on it, but it's the most precious thing I own. Maya listened without interrupting, sensing that David needed to tell this story in his own way, at his own pace. Around them, she could feel the other customers leaning in slightly, drawn into this unexpected drama unfolding at table 7. My phone rang at exactly 10:47, David continued, his voice becoming more steady as he fell into the rhythm of telling his story. I remember the time because I glanced at my computer screen when I answered. I was expecting it to be my assistant or maybe a client. Instead, it was a voice I didn't recognize, someone from City General Hospital. Maya felt her stomach drop. She had worked enough shifts at the cafe to know that unexpected calls from hospitals were never good news. She watched David's face as he relived that moment, seeing the exact instant when his world had fallen apart. The nurse on the phone was very professional, very calm, David said. She asked if I was the father of Lily Martinez-Chen, and when I said yes, she told me that my daughter had been involved in a serious motor vehicle accident. Those were her exact words. Serious motor vehicle accident. Like she was reading from a script. A soft gasp came from the young mother at the nearby table, and Maya saw her instinctively pull her own child a little closer. The college students had completely abandoned their textbooks, fully absorbed in David's story. I asked if she was okay. David continued, his voice getting quieter. And there was this pause. This terrible, endless pause where the nurse was probably trying to figure out how to tell a father that his daughter might be dying. She said that Lily was alive but in critical condition, and that I needed to get to the hospital as soon as possible. David stopped talking and stared down at his hands. Maya could see him reliving that phone call, feeling again the moment when his entire world shifted on its axis. She had never been a parent herself, but she could imagine the terror that must have gripped him in that instant. What happened then? Maya asked gently, when it became clear that David needed encouragement to continue. I hung up the phone and just sat there for a minute, David said. It was like my brain couldn't process what I had just heard. Lily had texted me that morning before school, complaining about a history test she wasn't ready for. She had seemed so normal, so wonderfully, perfectly normal. How could she be in critical condition at a hospital when she had been worried about a history test just 3 hours earlier? Maya reached across the table and touched David's hand briefly, a simple gesture of comfort that seemed to give him strength to go on. I tried to drive to the hospital, David said, but I was shaking so badly that I couldn't even get the key in the ignition. I kept thinking about all the conversations we would never have, all the Sunday morning teas we might never share again. I thought about her graduation next year, about walking her down the aisle someday, about grandchildren I might never meet. The cafe had become completely silent except for David's voice. Even Jake behind the counter had stopped what he was doing, caught up in this father's worst nightmare playing out at table 7. I finally managed to start the car, but I only made it 3 blocks before I had to pull over, David continued. I was crying so hard I couldn't see the road. I called my wife, but she was in surgery at her hospital across town. I left a message with her assistant, but I knew it would be hours before she could get to me. Maya could see the pain etched in every line of David's face as he remembered those terrible moments of feeling completely alone with the worst news of his life. That's when I saw this place, David said, gesturing around the cafe. I wasn't thinking clearly. I just knew I couldn't drive in the state I was in, and I needed a few minutes to pull myself together before I went to see whatever was left of my little girl. The words, "whatever was left," hung in the air like a physical blow, and Maya saw several customers wipe their own eyes. The young mother was crying openly now, probably imagining herself in David's position. I ordered the tea because it reminded me of her, David said, his voice becoming small and broken. Every Sunday morning for the past 5 years, she's made me chamomile tea with honey and lemon. We sit on our back porch and she tells me about her friends and her dreams and her plans for the future. It's the best hour of my entire week. Maya felt tears running down her own cheeks now. She understood why David had been so particular about the tea, why he had needed it to be perfect. It wasn't just a drink to him. It was a connection to his daughter, a desperate attempt to hold on to something normal when his world was falling apart. When the tea wasn't right, David continued, when it was too hot or too cool or not quite the same as what she makes for me, it felt like I was losing her all over again. It was stupid and irrational, but I couldn't think straight. Every small thing that went wrong felt like another sign that I was never going to get my daughter back. David looked directly at Maya, his eyes red and swollen from crying. I don't know why I threw it at you. I've never done anything like that in my entire life. I think I just needed someone to blame, someone to be angry at, because I couldn't be angry at the drunk driver who hit her car. He wasn't here, but you were, and you were trying to help me, and somehow that made it worse because I didn't deserve help. I didn't deserve kindness when my daughter was lying in a hospital bed. Maya reached across the table and took both of David's hands in hers, not caring that her own were still sticky from the tea he had thrown at her just minutes before. David, she said firmly, you absolutely deserve kindness. What happened to your daughter isn't your fault. You're a scared father who got terrible news and you reacted like any human being might react. It doesn't make what you did okay, but it doesn't make you a monster either. David squeezed her hands gratefully, and Maya could feel some of the tension leaving his body as he finally shared the burden he had been carrying alone. I need to get to the hospital, David said, his voice urgent again. I've been sitting here for over an hour, and she needs to know that her dad is there. But I'm still shaking and I don't think I can drive safely. I called 3 different taxi companies, but they're all backed up because of some event downtown. Maya looked at David's pale, exhausted face and made a decision that would surprise everyone in the cafe, including herself. She stood up from the table and walked over to where Jake was standing behind the counter, his eyes wide with amazement at everything he had just witnessed. Jake, Maya said quietly, I need to take my break now. Jake looked at her tea-stained uniform and then back at David, who was slumped in his chair like he had just run a marathon. Maya, Jake said, you don't have to do anything else for that guy. You've already been more kind to him than he deserves." Maya looked back at David, seeing not the angry man who had humiliated her, but a broken father who needed help getting to his critically injured daughter. "Yes, I do," Maya said simply. "I absolutely do." Maya walked back to table 7, her mind made up despite Jake's concerned protest from behind the counter. David was still sitting with his head in his hands, looking like a man who had used up every ounce of strength he had just to tell his story. When Maya sat down across from him again, he looked up with eyes that seemed older than they had been just an hour ago. "David," Maya said gently, "I'm going to drive you to the hospital." David stared at her like she had just spoken in a foreign language. "What? No, you can't do that." "I threw tea at you. I ruined your uniform. I embarrassed you in front of all these people. You don't owe me anything." Maya could feel the eyes of every customer in the cafe watching this exchange. The young mother at the nearby table had tears streaming down her face. The college students looked like they were witnessing something they would never forget. Even the businessman who always complained about his coffee being too cold was completely absorbed in what was happening. "You're right," Maya said, standing up and grabbing her purse from behind the counter. "I don't owe you anything. But your daughter needs her father and you can't drive in this condition. So I'm taking you to her." David's face crumpled again. "Why would you do that for me?" "After what I did to you?" Maya paused for a moment, thinking about her answer. "Because," she said finally, "if it was my dad who was hurt and some stranger's father needed help getting to me, I would hope someone would be kind enough to drive him." Jake appeared at Maya's elbow, holding her car keys that she had asked him to grab from her locker. "Are you sure about this?" he whispered. "I can call you a taxi or the police or—" Maya took her keys and squeezed Jake's arm gratefully. "I'm sure. Can you cover for me for a couple of hours? I'll explain everything to Rose later." Jake nodded reluctantly, still looking worried. "Just be careful, okay? Text me when you get there." As Maya and David walked toward the door, something unexpected happened. The businessman who never smiled stood up and approached them. "Excuse me," he said to David, "I couldn't help but overhear. I'm a father too. I hope your daughter is okay." The young mother with the baby also stood up. "I'll be praying for your family," she said softly. One by one, other customers began offering words of encouragement and support. The college students wished him luck. An elderly woman touched his arm and told him to have faith. Even a teenager who had been glued to her phone looked up to say she hoped everything would be all right. By the time Maya and David reached the door, David was crying again. But this time it seemed different. The anger and desperation had been replaced by something that looked almost like hope. "I can't believe this," David whispered as they walked to Maya's car. "An hour ago I was the worst person in that cafe. Now all these strangers are rooting for my daughter." Maya unlocked her small sedan and helped David into the passenger seat. His hands were still shaking, but not as badly as before. "People are generally good," she said, starting the engine. "Sometimes they just need to see someone else being good first." The drive to City General Hospital took 25 minutes through afternoon traffic. At first, David sat in silence, staring out the window like he was trying to prepare himself for whatever he would find when they arrived. But gradually he began to talk. "Lily wants to be a veterinarian," he said quietly. "She's been saving injured birds and stray cats since she was 6 years old. Our house always has some animal recovering in a shoebox in her bedroom." Maya smiled, keeping her eyes on the road. "She sounds like she has a big heart." "The biggest," David said, his voice warming as he talked about his daughter. "Last month she spent her entire allowance on food for the animal shelter. She said the dogs looked hungry, and she couldn't enjoy pizza knowing they were going without meals." As they got closer to the hospital, David's anxiety began building again. Maya could see him checking his phone every few seconds, hoping for updates that weren't coming. "What if I'm too late?" David said suddenly. "What if she was asking for me and I wasn't there because I was having a breakdown over tea?" Maya reached over and squeezed his hand briefly. "You're going to be there now. That's what matters." When they pulled into the hospital parking lot, David was out of the car almost before Maya had put it in park. She followed him through the automatic doors into the bright, sterile lobby that smelled like disinfectant and fear. David approached the information desk with Maya close behind him. "I'm looking for my daughter, Lily Martinez Chen. She was brought in earlier today from a car accident." The receptionist typed quickly on her computer. "She's in room 314. Take the elevator to the third floor and follow the signs to the ICU. The elevator ride felt like it lasted forever. David paced the small space like a caged animal, and Maya could see him trying to prepare himself for whatever condition he would find his daughter in. When they reached room 314, David stopped outside the door, suddenly frozen with fear. Through the window, Maya could see a young girl with dark hair lying in a hospital bed, connected to various machines but very much alive and awake. "She's okay?" Maya whispered. "David, look!" "She's awake." David's knees nearly gave out with relief. A doctor emerged from the room at that moment, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a tired smile. "Mr. Martinez-Chen, I'm Dr. Patel. Your daughter is going to be fine. She has a concussion, 3 broken ribs and a broken arm, but no internal bleeding and no spinal injuries. She's been asking for you for the past hour." David let out a sob of pure relief and gratitude. "Can I see her?" "Of course. She's been worried about you, too. Apparently, she was more concerned about you getting the news than she was about her own injuries." David turned to Maya before going into his daughter's room. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "You saved my life today in more ways than one." Maya hugged him briefly. "Just be a good dad to that girl in there. That's all the thanks I need." Maya stayed for a few more minutes, long enough to see David reunite with his daughter through the window. Lily's face lit up when she saw her father. And even with a cast on her arm and bandages on her head, she looked like the bright, caring girl David had described. 3 days later, David walked into Rosie's Corner Cafe carrying a huge bouquet of flowers and an envelope. The lunch rush was in full swing, but when the customers saw him, the same ones who had witnessed his breakdown began to applaud. Word had spread through the regular crowd about what had happened, and everyone wanted to know how Lily was doing. David approached the counter where Maya was working, looking like a completely different person than the broken man who had thrown tea at her. He was clean-shaven, his clothes were neat, and most importantly, his eyes had life in them again. "Maya," he said, setting the flowers on the counter, "I wanted to thank you properly." Inside the envelope was a letter of apology, a check to cover her uniform cleaning, and a generous tip for the entire staff, and a photo of David and Lily together in her hospital room, both of them smiling. "She wants to meet you," David said. "She said anyone who could be that kind to her father when he was at his worst is someone she wants to know." From that day forward, David became a regular at Rosie's Corner Cafe. He came in every Tuesday at the same time, ordered chamomile tea with honey and lemon, and always made sure to check on Maya and ask about her mother's recovery from surgery. But more than that, his story spread throughout the community. The customers who had witnessed Maya's compassion that day began treating each other differently. The businessman started smiling at the staff. The college students helped elderly customers carry their orders. The young mother began leaving extra tips when she saw servers having difficult days. Maya never made a big deal about what she had done. When people asked her why she had helped David instead of having him arrested, she would just smile and say, "We all have bad days." The difference is what we choose to do when we see someone else having theirs. 6 months later, when Lily had fully recovered and graduated high school with honors, she and David came to the cafe together for the first time. Lily ordered the same chamomile tea as her father, and Maya made it exactly the way David had requested that terrible Tuesday afternoon. But this time, when David tasted it, he smiled. "Perfect," he said, and everyone in the cafe knew he wasn't just talking about the tea. Maya's decision to respond with compassion instead of anger that day had changed more than just David's life. It had reminded an entire community that kindness is always a choice, and that sometimes the smallest act of human decency can transform not just one life, but many. The story of the angry customer who threw tea at a server and the server who chose love over hate became legendary at Rosie's Corner Cafe. New employees were told the story as an example of how to treat difficult customers. Regular customers shared it with friends and family as proof that good people still exist in the world. And Maya continued to serve tea and coffee with the same warm smile she had always had, knowing that you never know what kind of pain someone might be carrying, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply choose to be kind.